What it's about, it's about tap dancing, blackness and time. That really is what it's about, those three things. I'm going to read a little section from the beginning and then a longer section from the middle. It's about two girls, one called Tracy and one who doesn't have a name, and this is when they meet. You can't possibly remember the first time you met a child as a child. Anyone who says they can is lying. All you can do is reconstruct the general atmosphere of the days and know that in one of those days a bond was formed. If all the Saturdays of 1980 can be thought of as one day, I met Tracy at 10 a.m. on that Saturday, walking through the sandy gravel of a churchyard, each holding our mother's hands. There were many other girls present, but for obvious reasons we noticed each other, the similarities and the differences as girls will. Our shade of brown was exactly the same, as if one piece of tan material had been cut to make us both. And our freckles were the same and located in the same places. We were of the same height. But my face was ponderous and melancholy with a long, serious nose, far too long for a child. And my eyes turned down, as did my mouth. Tracy's face was perky and round. She looked like a darker Shirley Temple, except her nose was as problematic as mine. I could see that much at once, a ridiculous nose. It went straight up in the air like a little piglet. Cute, but also obscene. Her nostrils were on permanent display. On noses, you could call it a draw. On hair, she won comprehensively. She had spiral curls. They reached to her backside and were gathered into two long plaits, glossy with some kind of oil, tied at their ends with silk yellow bows. Silk yellow bows were a phenomenon unknown to my mother. She pulled my great frizz back in a single cloud, tied with a black band. My mother was a feminist. She wore her own hair in a half-inch afro. Her skull was perfectly shaped. She never wore makeup and dressed us both as plainly as possible. This was no sacrifice at all for her. Hair is not essential when you look like Nefertiti. She'd no need of makeup or products or jewelry or expensive clothes, and in this way her financial circumstance, her politics and her aesthetic were all perfectly, conveniently matched. Accessories of any kind only cramped her style, including, or so I felt at the time, the horse-faced 7-year-old by her side. Looking across at Tracy, I diagnosed the opposite problem. Her mother was white, obese, afflicted with acne. She wore her thin blonde hair pulled back very tightly in what I knew my mother would call a Kilburn facelift. Her clothes too were not to my mother's taste. Prominent logos, tin bangles and hoops, Diamante everything. Expensive trainers of the kind my mother refused to recognize as a reality in the world. Those aren't shoes. Yet despite appearances, there was not much to choose between our two families. We both lived on an estate, although not the same one, and got by on a single insufficient income. Neither of us received benefits. A matter of great pride for my mother, and outrage to Tracy, as she tried many times and failed to get on the disability. But in my mother's view, it was exactly these superficial similarities that lent so much weight to questions of taste. Still, her method seemed obscure to me, unnecessarily oblique. The plain white linen trousers she wore, her blue and white striped Breton t-shirt, her crumbling espadrilles, her severe and beautiful African head, everything so plain, so understated, completely out of step with the spirit of the time and with the place. Later, I better understood what my mother was trying to demonstrate to the world. Not ownership of things, but the comprehension of certain ideas. She dressed for a future not yet with us, one she felt confident would eventually arrive. One day we would get out of here, and one day my mother would truly be radical chic, perhaps even spoken of in the same breath as Angela Davis and Gloria Steinem. Straw-soled shoes were all a part of this bold vision. They pointed subtly at the higher concepts. I was an accessory only in the sense that in my very plainness I signified admirable maternal restraint, it being considered bad taste, in the circles to which my mother aspired, to dress your daughter like a little whore. But Tracy was unashamedly her mother's accessory, her aspiration and avatar, her only joy, in those thrilling yellow bows and a frou-frou skirt of many ruffles and a crop top revealing several inches of childish, nut-brown belly. And as we pressed up against the pair of them in this bottleneck of mothers and daughters entering the church, I watched with interest as Tracy's mother pushed the girl in front of herself and in front of us, using her own body as a means of obstruction, until she emerged into Miss Eleanor's dance class with a look of great pride and anxiety on her face, appropriate for placing precious cargo in the temporary care of others. My mother's attitude, by contrast, was one of weary, semi-ironic servitude. She thought the dance class ridiculous, she had better things to do, and after a few further Saturdays, in which she sat slumped in one of the plastic chairs that lined the left-hand wall, hardly able to contain her contempt for the whole exercise, a change was made, and my father took over. I waited for Tracy's father to take over, but he never did. It turned out, as my mother had guessed at once, that there was no Tracy's father. This too was an example of bad taste. So that's how they meet.